Hello and welcome to another episode of the Course in Miracles inspired podcast, May the Course be with you, where I, Leon Joel Russell, get to speak to the people that I love about the system that we love. Steve, how are you?
Doing great. How you doing, Leon?
Yeah, really good. Very, very grateful to have your presence. And I know that you're one of the busiest people who've been on the podcast so far with a very full diary. So do appreciate your time very much.
Well, things like this are of ultimate importance to me.
Amazing. Yeah, I know you used the word or the words, you spoke about the vital message and saying that you were at hand to help with the vital message of the course, which I thought was beautifully put.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, once the course, once the student, once a person becomes a student of the course, meaning they're ready to hear things that will transform their path completely, which we're all on in a sense. You know, we find what's right for us at a particular time, and then maybe we go to something else. But those that discover the course, I think there's a pull to try to inspire or encourage others to at least take a peek to see the value that's there.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know, like you and I had a get together a few weeks ago, and we never got round to pressing record because we're having such a lovely time
Yeah.
discussing the course together, and obviously music with our shared interest in music. So yeah, just to give people background on that they're getting to see our second conversation. But the first time, you know, yeah, it was really beautiful for me because I think you've got a lovely take on the material. There's something I was going to read to you, and I thought, I wonder what you think if you hear this. What does this say to you? Forgiveness changes the quality of your whole life and all the people in it and everything. When you understand what it is, it's authentic looking past your own illusions and the illusions of others. What do you reckon
Yeah.
of that?
Well, that's how the course's teaching on what forgiveness is very different than the world's understanding of forgiveness.
Mm.
In the world, forgiveness for a lot of people in certain situations, it's a difficult thing, you know, because there's the belief that somebody has done something wrong to you that's unforgivable. And there's no way. Maybe I can forgive that. Maybe I can forgive that, but not that. You know, so this is the world's idea of what forgiveness is, and there's many different uh, levels to that or dimensions to the world's understanding of what forgiveness is. Uh, in reality, the forgiveness, and of course, this isn't in the entire world. There are people that understand what it means, and but basically, as the course states, you know, the world's idea of forgiveness is more or less a bargain. You know, it's I will forgive you, but don't you forget that I have forgiven you, and I'll need that favor returned sometime. and you owe me, or it's the lofty state of mind of being the pardoner. I have forgiven you because I take the high road.
Mm.
So it's a very elusive thing, but true forgiveness is the recognition that there's nothing to forgive
Mm.
in reality. It's okay. So our lives have tremendous amounts of experiences that we perceive as being good, bad, fantastic, terrible, all through our life. We judge our experiences and then we give them the meaning they have for us alone, not anybody else.
Mm.
And that becomes our reality. Our reality is based on our own personal belief system that we carved through our entire life. And nobody's personal reality is the same as anybody else's in the history of existence. you know so our sense of reality is sort of a pseudo reality. I always say there's two realities. There's our egoic idea of what reality is,
Mhm.
and then there's true reality. And in order to experience or start to get glimpses of reality, you have to remove the meaning that you've given everything.
Yeah.
And I learned this in the course, but the idea of forgiveness, uh, so for instance, we all probably have things in our past where we look at and we think, why did that happen? Why did that have to happen to me?
Mm.
Why did they or he or she do that? Why did I do that? How could I have done that? Right? So this creates uh, stress in us, conflict, and we carry it for our whole life. And it affects everything we do, even on a subtle, maybe a very subtle level, but it affects the world we see because we're looking through victim eyes
Mm.
into the world when we hold a grievance
Mm.
and we cannot forgive.
Mm.
And understandably, the idea of forgiveness in the world's view is a heavy lift in certain situations,
Mm.
you know, murder, financial ruin, loss of face, all of these things just seem unforgivable.
Mm.
But in reality, when you look back at a past experience and you say they should not have done that, but they did. I should not have done that. I should have known better, but you didn't.
Mm.
So this is just a fact, right?
Mm.
Nobody can act outside of the conditioning of their consciousness at any given time. We don't have the tools yet, to make a better decision requires the appropriate tools. Life will give you those tools through the experiences that you have.
Mm.
And sometimes they're not pleasant, you know. And but when you look back and you say, why did he should have known? It's sort of like saying, why are you short? Why are you tall? Why are you black? Why are you white? Why are you gay? Why are you this? Why are you that? It's an insane question
Mm.
when you look at it at face value because things are as they are. So when you recognize that that person did not have the tools to make a better decision, and nor did I didn't have the tools. The experience itself will kick off a response, the effect that will give you the opportunity to gain those tools, and that's what's important, not the form,
mm,
that the situation took. What's most important is you developing your independence from uh, from your own grievances,
mm,
from your own past. Forgiveness heals the past because it was never broken, and you see, the forgiveness shows you that it wasn't broken.
mm.
So when you understand that you couldn't have acted outside of where you were at that time, it's easy. There's nothing to forgive. That's what it is. That's where you're at. Just like today, we're all engaging in situations that are wonderful, challenging, and the challenge is, frankly, the most important thing
Yeah.
because they give you an opportunity to shore up your independence. Because for recognizing that you don't have the tools to make a better decision yet, the effects of your decisions are going to lead to situations where eventually you're going to find the tools, and that's the vital element.
Mm,
And I say forgiveness is a looking past, 'cause
mm,
that's from the course.
mm,
It's as if true forgiveness is as if it's not there. It's actually this situation is not there as you see it, as
yeah.
as you saw it. So the way you were seeing those events from the past were kind of stories in your head,
Mm,
right?
mm,
So they're illusions.
mm,
I am creating illusion. Now, I'm not denying that things happened and that I I could have let's say I could have made better choices, although you couldn't have.
mm.
You couldn't have. You didn't have the tools. The end. Can't, that's it. Or you would have.
Yeah.
Say, yeah, but I should have. Yes, but you didn't.
Yeah.
So now you can. Hurrah. So the uh oh, I forgot the point. Yeah, the true forgiveness is the recognition there's nothing to forgive.
Mm,
So this is why in the course, our perspective and the stories that we tell ourselves about the past are so painful, or the fear we experience by projecting into the future.
yeah.
These are both the same.
Yeah.
You have to recognize that the way you're thinking about something is upside down.
Mm,
It's not based in common sense spiritual reason, as the course constantly promotes and talks about reason.
mm,
So one can say your stories in your head about the past are illusions.
mm,
And one of the basic tenets of the course is before you can forgive anybody, anything, or the world or anything, you have to forgive yourself, your own illusions.
mm,
Those thoughts in your mind about things that we believe are true,
mm.
but are just like that are different in everybody else's mind.
Yeah.
Everybody. So
Yeah.
who's correct?
Mm.
Everybody and nobody, because they're very real illusions,
Yeah.
but they're illusions. So when you start forgiving yourself your own illusions, what you're doing is you're recognizing that the story you're telling yourself about the world and about mostly about yourself, we don't realize we're doing it.
Mm.
We don't realize we're doing it. We create identities for ourselves that are completely fictitious. And we have to forgive ourselves those illusions before we can know who we truly are. You know what I mean?
Of course.
Once
Yeah.
you are able to recognize your own illusions, and this is one of the greatest things that can happen to a human being, is to recognize your own illusions. Then, if you're ready, you can remove those
Mm,
or change them or at least hand them off
mm,
to your higher self, to the Holy Spirit, as the Course puts it. And then when you see somebody else doing something that just irks you, that just disturbs you, where you think they shouldn't be that way. Imagine that. That's an illusion. And you can forgive yourself. They believe in the identity they created for themselves. So you can forgive them for that, because nothing of what they're believing about themselves in reality is true. So the anger or the fear that you have for that, it dissolves instantly. You're not looking at the egoic personality anymore. You're forgiving it.
Mm.
You're forgiving the illusions of the other because you've seen them in yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's your evidence.
Mm.
So then there's love, then there's love. That's because that's what's behind the illusions.
Yeah.
And it, of course, takes you deep. It's like your illusions are not just the thoughts you think about your past. It's the belief that that's a tree. That's an illusion. Of course, on one level, it's fine. You call it a tree. You have it in your backyard. You can call the florist and say, I would like a California pepper tree with a blah, 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 and I want it to be, whatever. And that's all fine. But those are all illusions in regard to what that tree actually is.
Mm.
The human ego will never know. It'll remain a mystery for eternity to the human ego what that tree is. So the heavy lift is forgiving yourself your illusions.
Mm.
Because what it's saying is everything that I see in this world, on this street, in this room, is accompanied by a storied belief that I've created about it that's just not true. It's an illusion. So,
Amazing.
and this forgiveness is the key. In the Course, it's like the only thing of any real value in this world is forgiveness,
Mm.
because from it comes everything. It's a one-way street. Nothing else in this world is a one-way street.
Mm.
Everything holds you back, or cause and effect.
Yeah.
But forgiveness is the way out. And people say, I don't want to go out. I like my illusions. That's because you don't know what freedom is. You haven't experienced the idea of what true freedom is, because that's another anomaly in the world. The word freedom.
Mm.
The world's idea of freedom is that it needs to be legislated into Congress. It has to be legislated by politics in order for you to have your freedom. This is an illusion. Okay. It's fine. Yeah, there's certain crazy um, uh, ebbs and flows of the laws. And, laws create criminals out of all of us. But that's not the kind of freedom that the Course refers to. Freedom from your illusions.
Mm.
There is a sense of security, a sense of such deep joy, appreciation, when you're even able to glimpse the idea of what that freedom that the Course talks about is.
Mm.
And the only way to even glimpse it is to understand what the Course's reference to forgiveness is.
Yeah. And forgiveness, I like to say to people, in the Course's definition of forgiveness, it's a passive presence that initiates, or doesn't even initiate, it gives access to a perception, like you're saying, is the only perception that leads away from illusion.
Yeah.
And it's a way of circumventing the subject object paradigm of consciousness, and to just be aware in a situation of what's happening without applying any meaning. And the
Yeah.
meaning is the judgment. And we use the word forgiveness in our course study as the descriptive term to say this is the passive presence that you connect with when you're looking at anything, whether it's up, down, in, out, extreme, boring, whatever. And you look beyond that meaning that your limited, finite mind wants to project onto what it sees in front of it. It's still going to play on in your mind, it's still going to bubble away, but instead of staying at that layer and listening and identifying and believing it, you just let that bubble away without, whilst knowing that it's not true, and truth is love, and everything that you see is love,
Yeah.
whether or not it's a tree, like you say, or a person or behavior or
Yeah.
whatever. And then that lack of applying distinctions, levels of meaning, and just allowing things to be exactly as they are.
Yeah.
The truth of love is so far beyond what we could conceive and perceive and overlay and decide upon, that when we remove ourselves from the equation, reality is just beyond anything that we could ever think of. And that again is the freedom of like, well, sometimes I'll say to people, imagine if you got an invitation to a party and it said, there's a party on Saturday night. This party will be so much better if you don't come. And you give that to your ego, and your ego's like, I beg your pardon, but how could the
Yeah.
party be good
Yeah.
if I'm not there, darling? And it's
Yeah.
like, no, because you're going to limit everything. You're going to try and apply meaning where the meaning is far beyond what you're even capable of
Yeah.
perceiving.
Yeah.
And that little loop, I know last time you and I ended up using the phrase feedback loop a lot,
Yeah.
talking about what we pour into a moment, into an instant, into a relationship. And relationship as well being that word that isn't confined to two guys talking, or me and my wife, or you and your wife, or me and a moment, me and a record that I like. Relationship is an across the board term that applies to our connection with absolutely everything. And if everything isn't different and distinct, if it's all just the same maximal manifestation of love, then there's the freedom again. And in that feedback loop, we just experience it reflected back at us. If we can go beyond that chatter, that
Yeah.
historically we've we've been conditioned and indoctrinated to think the more you invest in that, the more you ramp that up, the more intelligent you become. So therefore, the more depth you're going to be able to see to everything.
Yeah.
So such a counterintuitive journey to undo, and that's why undoing is such a
Yeah.
beautiful word in our study as well, isn't it?
Yeah. I love that. The undoing requires recognition of the obstacles. And
Yeah.
I love what you said because it points right to the state of presence,
Mm.
and which in the course is referred to as the holy instant,
Mm.
where there's just there's no none of the meaning that you give things. There's just an openness. And it's so great in the course when it says, I have to paraphrase,
Mm.
the course will not teach, it cannot teach you love, but it can show you the obstacles to the presence of love that is already within you.
Yeah.
Uh, and whenever I enter a situation like you mentioned, where you're working with people, you're dealing with people, or you're going through a challenge,
Mm.
a mental challenge. It could
Mm.
be anything, personal, financial, anything. I love just thinking all right, I know that I'm caught up in this, but in reality, all is well. In
Mhm,
reality, this is all actually behind this is love,
mhm.
and I'm already secure. I need do nothing. And that right away just it helps to get you in that receptive mode, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, so you can pour more of the light into the moment, or it's not even pour it in because it's there, isn't it?
There, you can allow it in.
You allow it, yeah. And welcome as well. As a teacher that I
Yeah.
really love who uses the word welcome. And I think these things aren't verbs, are they? Forgiveness isn't a verb in course language
Mm,
because it's a descriptive term to imply that we just fully engage with the presence of right-minded awareness. And right-minded awareness is to just observe any given situation, any given moment with this same perception, which is to just allow all things to be exactly as they are. And in doing
exactly.
so, you haven't belittled your experience and belittled creation because you haven't overlaid a meaning which isn't there and which is tiny in relation to the true meaning of
Yeah.
love.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
Mm,
Uh, uh, yeah, that is a constant. Life is a offers constant opportunities,
mm,
and very interesting. I may have talked about this when we spoke last about handing off your problems
okay,
to the Holy Spirit,
right.
or to whatever Jesus, to God. You hand them off, and that's faith, uh, because I haven't. Let's say I have an issue. I can't figure it out. My reputation is at stake, or something is at stake, and
Mm,
I have to figure this out. And there's a lot of moving parts, and it's very complicated, and things are changing. You don't know all the parameters.
I've got you,
You
yeah.
don't know what's coming, what's going. You can't. And it's another great aspect of the course when it says it's not that you shouldn't judge, you can't judge. You just can't. And I remember reading that and going, that's right. How could I judge anything? you know, and that's freedom.
It's
So
freedom.
the recognition that when you enter that space of the holy instant, so to speak, it's great when the course says, as of now, you can practice aspects of the holy instance and it will be helpful. And I assume what that means is your most intense ability to be present is just practicing a tiny aspect of what the holy instant is. But once you're open to it, you're handing off all the particulars of a
Mm,
situation to your guide,
mm,
and then you're not intruding the past.
yeah.
And we intrude the past on our better judgment by defending ourselves in our head.
Mm,
We say the present. Let's just say the guides, when we're in the state, the receptive mode of taking appropriate action in a particular situation, that action and those words come seamlessly. They come as easy as breathing, the course
yeah.
says.
Yeah.
So imagine that, like I'm in this situation. It seems so serious, you know. Uh, I have to figure it out. Well, you know what? I can't. So I'm just going to become very present
Mm,
and take away all the meaning I'm giving things.
mm,
And what very interesting thing happens. You see the situation cl clearer, more clear, and you're navigating in a state of practical reason.
mm,
And when you do that, the words that they feel like your words,
yeah.
and the miracle is they are, but they're not.
Yeah.
You know, they are your words. What they are is what's meant for you at that
Mm,
moment,
mm,
as being guided by your, in course terminology, the Holy Spirit. You hand it off. I
mm.
started doing this some years ago. I still, there's a momentum of trying to figure things out,
Yeah. Yeah, of
you
course.
know.
Yeah.
But when I just say I don't know,
Mm,
I'm just gonna, I'm handing it off.
mm,
He knows
mm.
what's best. I say he, but
Yeah, I know what you
the
mean.
universe knows what's best for me to do in this moment because it put me here and it created me. So who am I to, like, do do what's practical and reasonable,
Mm,
and listen. And it's not like a listening. It's just like a allowing. It's an
mm.
allowing of just getting out of the way and just allowing things to happen. Krishnamurti, I may have mentioned this, one of the greatest quotes. He said, "Is it possible for you to take action without thinking?" You know, and the answer is yes, because you're doing it all the time. You're not beating your heart. When the interview is over, I'm just going to automatically turn my computer down. I'm going to get up and I'm going to go over there. It's not like I have to think about any of that.
Yeah.
And and that your whole life can be like that, because when we're connected to that voice of reason,
Hmm.
it is only offering us God's plan for us, which is our joy.
Mm,
And it can only ever lead to our joy
mm.
if we get out of the, imagine that,
Well,
and the joy of others.
yeah.
Because there's nothing you can do in the holy instant that could possibly hurt yourself, others, a situation. Never, never.
Mm,
And it's the exact opposite, actually.
mm.
Yeah.
But how interesting as well, if you think about the scale of the re-identification process of what you need to go through to go beyond this belief that you're a person, that you've got a discrete, localized consciousness, that you're a separate entity and you have private thoughts and you have an
Yeah.
experience that's singular to you, and you have to have that complete reorientation, and also a re-identification with the flip side to that. And I know there's like an Adishanti phrase that I'll often quote on the channel, and that's imagine trust in silence more than any thought that you could have.
I love that. I love that. I got to remember that.
It is insanely powerful, and it's like,
Powerful.
and again, that comes back to my joking thing of like the invitation to the party. It's like, imagine, like you're saying, being quiet, deferring, not intruding upon your guest, your holy companion, with your overlay of your limited perception that could possibly never know everything, and isn't capable of understanding the entirety of the meaning of love.
Mhm.
You limit that, or you sack that off by learning to turn around and think every thought that you have, where you lean in and go, oh yeah, that's important, oh yeah, I'm onto something there, oh well, I should, all of that, you gradually just let that bubble away to the point where you just learn to watch it as an
Watch it.
activity of mind, which, if you trace it back, there's no entity. It's just like a computer screen, just constantly scrolling all of the data that's inside of it.
Yeah.
It's nothing. It's just an activity. And then
It's an activity. Yeah.
as you withdraw from identifying with that activity, here's the presence, and that presence is the silence that you've turned around and gone, oh, actually, imagine trusting silence more than any thought that I could have. So
Yeah.
I ignore that activity and don't ignore it, but I disidentify with it. And by doing so, a
Yeah.
lovely phrase in the course that I love where it says, the mind reaches to itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're pouring in attention. The currency, the transaction, if you like, is attention. The currency
Yes.
is,
Yes.
is
Yeah.
attention. So if you lean in and follow all of that, blah, 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 then that ramps up and it ramps up and you identify and you're in this locked little feedback loop. And then the moment you step back and you start to identify with the silence, then the mind goes, oh, what's this? And it's like, well, that's your identity, that's your presence, that's who you actually are. That is the, if you like, the filtration of the peace and happiness and the joy that's reflected as love, as in our experience. And if you learn to quieten your mind, that becomes louder. Excuse, it's almost like a pun
Yeah.
to say the silence becomes
Yeah.
louder.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Beautiful.
And then it's like the Alan Watts thing that I'll quote sometimes, where he says, we are the aperture through which the universe looks at itself.
Yeah.
So, therefore, if my aperture is this tiny little pinhole, and then I learn to open that up wider and wider, what comes through? It's like more and more light,
Yeah.
to the point where, now we're going back to what you were saying earlier, we're removing the obstacles. So, love is there behind the clouds. We've allowed these clouds to come in front of the love.
Yeah.
Once they dissipate and the love's on show, we've opened that aperture to know it and identify it with it more and more. And then what do we do with it? Then we pour it in to whatever our experience is, from my perception and perspective as a musician and shared with yourself. It now means I've got a larger
Aperture.
yeah, a larger storehouse or something to then turn that feeling, that presence into sound, if you like.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Yeah. It's when we're giving our precious attention to the noise, we're squandering our real treasure. Uh, you know, uh, and I think one of the issues I know was for me in the beginning
Mm-hmm.
when hearing or learning about presence is what that I'm not going to think of anything. I'm not going to have any thoughts. What'll happen to, will I exist? Like how can you not think? How do you get anything done? Well, I'm going to just sit there, and this is a legitimate concern for some people.
Oh yeah.
What's not realized is squandering your attention on nonsensical, illusory thoughts
Mm.
uh, is a deterrent. But the
Right.
state of presence, your attention, when you say, uh, stillness or silence, it's referring to also the non-movement of thought.
Mm.
It
Mm.
silence and the stillness is not necessarily just being still physically. It's the mentally still,
Sure.
no thought.
Mm.
And what happens is that it, many people, we all have moments of this, especially when we're being uniquely creative, like you mentioned, because
Mhm.
that when we create that opening, it's not like there's nothing there. Everything is there, everything.
Yeah.
And your uniquely creative impulses arise only in that state of presence when you're allowing stillness and you're allowing they come to you as inspired thoughts.
Mm.
You get a download for a song, for a project,
Mm.
and then you receive inspired thoughts for the manifesting of it as you do it.
Yeah.
And then you come across challenges and you can forget.
Yeah.
And then you're in hell again. And you're blaming people for why you're not, this or that. So, yeah, that ability to grab and hold on to the presence,
Mm,
it opens everything up. The
mm,
things you do have real quality.
mm,
Simple little thing. The conversation, the
mm.
words that come out from present, they don't. Those words aren't derived from intellectual meandering in your head.
Yeah, yeah.
They're instant recognitions of the most reasonable, practical, solutionary thing to
Mm,
say or do
mm.
or not say.
Yeah.
Uh, sometimes silence from the mouth is what presence will offer. And
Mm.
sometimes it may offer you, it may have you standing up and doing something,
Sure.
but uh, yeah, I think it's a confusement in people's mind. Some people
Mm,
like
mm,
what the state of presence will offer them.
mm. Yeah,
It's almost like
I've used like a comparison with physics before, and that period where you had your Newtonian physics, where essentially you were saying, space is just empty, there's nothing in it, it's dead, emptied space, and then the evolution of that contemplation being Einstein saying actually there's no such thing as empty dead space, because it's all the fabric of creation is alive. There's the stillness and the silence as you're explaining isn't like reflective of a non-entity. It's full. It's absolutely full with presence.
yeah, we can't see what we don't see. Yeah, and it's very interesting because when you consider what looks like is outside of us, and you can't define space. The space you can't. How do you define it? You can't. You
No.
can't say it's empty. But without it, nothing can exist.
Yeah.
The space is necessary for everything to exist. And
Mm.
I just love so much. I remember when I read in the course that God is the light in which you see.
Mhm.
At first I thought, okay, the light. Yeah, there's light. It's not that light.
Mm.
It's not referring to physical light.
Mm.
It's referring to what you can't describe. Awareness itself,
Yeah.
existent, the isness of the present moment itself, the fact that things are. How do you even explain it? You can't, and
No.
and that's God. You know, Infinite expansion, infinite freedom, and infinite love. It's interesting. You said something before. I used to think, why is it that some people are ready and some people aren't? You know, and I asked that question sincerely, and I started to get what I thought was answers. And the answer is everybody is ready for what's happening to them now. Whatever that is, they're ready. It might be a religion, it might be no religion.
Mm.
But then I think, well, why is it that some of us are ahead or behind, Because I know I'm behind, you know? And I remember reading in the course about the manual for teachers, I believe, about reincarnation.
Mhm.
And the course spelled it out so beautifully. It was always in the back of my mind. It's sort of like my analogy of reincarnation is it's like on Earth, we have day and night, and they're very real to us. But if you go into space, there's no such thing as day and night. It's an illusion. It exists, but it's an illusion.
Nice.
And that's kind of my analogy for reincarnation. Yes, it exists,
Yeah.
but ultimately it's an illusion.
Yeah.
you never die, but in this churning wheel
Hmm.
that we're in, uh, each one of us is on a particular course that's vital for each other in our evolution. So it doesn't matter what you come into the world with. Ultimately, there's one goal, and you've already reached it. You know, you just don't know it.
Beautiful. And that creates such a lovely level playing field for
Yeah,
everything that people do. Because then it's like, I was thinking when you were talking about for some people to find that presence where their mind goes quiet and they can allow all of the inspiration to be poured into their experience, they have to climb a huge mountain rock face without ropes to silence their mind, because if they don't
yeah.
think, if they're not sharp and right there in that moment, they're going to fall and die.
Life is dependent on being bulletproof present.
That's right. And like, for me to be present would be like, oh, I'm going to pick my guitar up and like
Yeah,
run my fingers over some wood and some metal. It's like, oh, that's
yeah,
right, isn't it?
works for me.
Yeah.
I'll take that over parkour.
But then, if we don't make any distinctions, then making a cup of tea or flashing your headlights so that somebody can pull out before you at a junction, or walking your dog, or it's just
Yeah,
absolutely everything on that same level of you're being presented with this exactly identical scenario in every moment, and every moment is all moments, in which you can allow everything to be what it is, and for its true radiance to reach you to the extent that it can, based on your kind of virtual reality headset. Or you can be lost in your thoughts and the mental activity, and as a consequence of that, you won't be where you are because you're listening to something about the past or the future, and the beauty in front of you isn't perceivable because you're leaning into listening to something
yeah,
that's a grievance, and you're attacking, or you're scared,
yeah.
or blah, blah, blah.
You know, it's a great part of the course where it says when you're doing that, basically engaged in nonsensical thoughts, your mind is actually blank. You're not thinking at all.
Yeah.
And when I first read that, I was like, "What do you mean by that?" You know, like my mind is blank when I'm thinking. You know, and I get it because the slate of the mind is written on by your inner being with you.
Mm,
You know, but you got to create the space for it.
mm.
When we're not present, our mind is actually blank.
Yeah,
It's empty.
yeah.
Course says it's empty. You're not there in reality. And then I started to understand what that meant. And it was the funny thing about the course when you start making connections
Hmm.
is they can happen often and they're stunning. You
Mm,
know, the way they can just change your perspective on everything.
mm.
I
Well,
know for me,
sorry, go on.
they start out as an intellectual understanding of, you can't judge. Not that you shouldn't judge, you can't judge. Well,
Yeah.
kind of get that. All right, makes sense. But then you're like after a while, you've allowed reason, you've allowed reason into your mind and it grows.
Yeah.
It becomes real in your life because
Mhm.
then you find yourself, and I still judge. It's a knee-jerk reaction,
Yeah, of course.
And of course we have to make decisions that's different than a judgment.
Mm,
But it's when you start catching yourself judging,
mm.
judging something that you don't know everything about.
mm,
It's an opinion.
mm,
That's all. And the course says that your judgments are actually just opinions.
mm. Yeah, yeah. And to go back to what I asked you earlier, because this is actually your words. Forgiveness changes the quality of your whole life and all the people in it and everything. When you understand what it is, it's the authentic looking past of your own illusions and the illusions of others. So that's actually the reason that I read that to you, is because it was your words and it was the thing that jumped out to me hugely from your Miracle Voices episode.
Oh.
And then to tie it in with something from the Course where it says to forgive is merely to remember only the loving thoughts that you
Mhm.
gave in the past and those that were given you.
I love that.
I love the word merely.
Merely, yeah, merely. And while you're at it, move that mountain.
Yeah. And the mountain is, you know, the Adishanti phrase of imagine trust in silence more than any thought that you could have.
Yeah,
I feel like I could turn that over in my mind for about like 100 years and just still be going,
absolutely.
what,
Yeah.
you know.
There's this great thing I've been experimenting with for a while, and it's based off of that Krishnamurti phrase, can you take action without thinking?
Mm,
And it's almost like I've heard it called like remote viewing or something,
okay.
where you actually it's kind of hard to explain. You just watch yourself.
Mm,
You just completely become the observing presence, and it's like you're functioning about here.
mm,
And it's a for me it's a very slippery slope because I want to add myself to the equation.
mm-hmm,
But when you can remove yourself and just allow your body to do what it will,
mm-hmm,
you realize you do it more often than you think, but to do it deliberately,
right. Yeah.
a different story,
Yeah.
because you have to keep your mind clear. You have to enter that state
Mm,
of being the non-judgmental observer, just being
mm,
the pure observer, as if your body and your actions are separate
brilliant.
from you deciding.
Brilliant.
And what I notice, very interesting things, when I need to do something or when an action comes, it comes with a very simple impulse.
Mm,
It's not like you're not a part of it.
mm,
Not like you're not in control. It's all through you
mm,
and through your will, but there's a connection in your actions it's like it's seamless.
mm,
There's no uh, dysfunction. There's no trying to figure out if it's the right thing to do or not.
mm,
There's a total allowance and an ease and a flow, and you do little things, and although you're observing, your attention is on that thing,
mm,
and there's a quality that flows into it,
mm.
and you do it. The very interesting. It started years ago when I would have a little ritual every night when we go
Okay.
to bed, and my wife is getting ready.
Yeah.
I I set I prepare the bed.
Mm-hmm.
I grab her teacup. I
Yeah.
grab her water glass, and I grab what we call a little hottie. It's like a hot water bottle that looks
Yeah.
like a little ham. And I make her tea, fill the hottie. I do all these little things. I put the bed back. And as I'm doing all of that, and this was what it first really dawned on me, I would practice presence, just
Mm,
allowing and being the observer.
mm.
And it is for me at least, it was a real practice.
Of course.
But there's this incredible joy, like a
Mm,
real deep, because well, how can you enjoy filling up a water bottle?
mm,
How can that be joyful?
mm,
Like, how could it be joyful to pull the sheet down on a bed?
mm.
It's like, no, that's not living life. This is what the ego says.
Hmm.
But when you're doing that in that connected state, it harkens on that phrase, it's the little things.
Mm.
It's the little things, because those little things they're joyous. They have a
Mm.
life.
Mm.
Each little movement is like its own life.
Mm.
Is and um well, that's as far as I'll go with it. But
Oh, mate, that's absolutely
great
beautiful.
practice.
Absolutely beautiful. It's about two or three things that you've brought to mind there. One of them is, from that point of observation, that makes me think of when it says, one of the phases of integrating the course material is to realize that the Leon and Steve that read A Course in Miracles is not who the voice of the material is speaking to. It's speaking to the mind outside the dream who thinks it's Leon, who thinks it's Steve,
Yes.
who thinks they're a person, blah, blah, blah. And then it also makes me think of the word inspiration or inspired, and the way that, sometimes we'll hear that broken down into in spirit,
Inspirited, yeah,
yeah,
inspirited.
that kind of thing. And then also recently, I was sharing something with some friends of mine about an experience that I had where I was tiling somebody's bathroom, and then right at the end of the process, it appeared that there was a load of cracks in the glaze on the tile, and the whole thing had to come down and go in the skip and be thrown away. And yet I'd put maybe a week or so of love and effort into doing this to the best of my ability, and then I had to smash it to bits. And there was this one moment where I had a great big heavy club hammer and a chisel, and I was smashing my work apart. And it was the most beautiful, joyful moment because I was just so present. It didn't matter what I was doing, whether I was making, like you say, making the bed ready for your wife or a cup of
Yeah,
tea. I was actually, in world terms, doing something really destructive and something like, oh no, my work, and all this kind of
yeah,
thing. But I was so aware at the moment of like watching from beyond what was happening and just
yeah.
seeing it. It didn't matter what was going on because it wasn't that was going on. It was I was present to see the.
Yeah, there's a difference between that and disassociation, which is a frame of mind. I think some people enter in a panic mode, or a horrific life situation where they just disassociate.
Mm,
It's sort of, I think it's sort of similar, but one is deliberate. Uh, y-
mm,
and it's interesting. After I um, was trying that out, remote viewing, so to speak,
yeah.
I thought, well, why can't I do this when I'm performing?
Hmm.
And I realized that at my best moments, that's what I was doing. But when I first started to be deliberate with it, I was up against my ego,
Hmm.
which walking onto a stage with people expecting you to be great,
Yeah.
um, there's there's a concern, there's a nervousness, there's the ego,
Mm.
you know,
A sense of
whatever it
duty.
is. The ability to become a remote viewer, I couldn't do it at
Mm.
first,
Mm.
like I was too in my body,
Mm.
I couldn't get out, so to speak.
Mm.
So, but then once through the years and performing so much,
Mm.
I use it as an opportunity to experiment more and more with being that remote viewer.
Yeah.
And it's just a miracle. It's just a total miracle. At first, when I was able to kind of slip into that and just see myself doing it, it wasn't just seeing myself. It was being actually a part of everything.
Right.
It's the ability to be a part of the environment The audience, the sound that's coming out of the band, the notes, the different chords, the your body language, the feeling of the air, the ambience in the room, the energy. It's not like your attention is on one of these things.
Wow.
You're in allowing yourself to experience it all in the moment, and the main attention is so amazing when I know for me when I can and I see this in other performers, I know they're doing it.
Yeah.
It maybe not expressed the way I'm kind of talking about, but you become the observer of what you're doing, and then there's this beautiful intimate space where it's hard to explain. I'm sure you know. Your attention is like in the future, like uh, you're guiding, you're allowing, and then you're doing. And while you're doing, you're allowing the next.
Yes.
And then the doing becomes what you observe. And the allowing is where your kind of attention is. And when you're observing what you're allowing, it's fresh, it's interesting, you're connected, it's new, it's engaging for others that are interested. You know,
Yeah.
it's not,
Yeah.
it may not be engaging for everybody, but but it's beautiful. You know, it's beautiful because your potential as a creative can only truly be exercised when you're embracing the present moment. And the present moment is what the holy instant or that silence that you just talked about, preferring over the mind chatter, because I'm very aware of how destructive, how interruptive mind chatter is when you're trying to make a musical statement.
That's
Because the
so.
mind is going, what if they don't like it? You know, what if I fail at this? Am I gonna? What if I run out of ideas? You know, blah 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 blah. Like how does that serve you? You know, but it just seems to be the go-to focus for so many of us.
That is so beautifully expressed, and I think that can only be articulated because of your journey with opening that aperture for truth and reality to be present in your conscious awareness. And I'm so glad that you put that in my mind, because the first bit of music that ever really impacted upon me, both of my parents loved music.
Yeah.
Um, Singing along with it, they neither of them could play, but they interacted with music in such a way that I first had first hand viewing of what it means to connect with music. So
Mm,
you're not in the same room as a song that's playing on the radio. You're inhabiting that music with body
mhm.
movements, with singing, with joy. And I used to, watch the two of them when I was a kid. Um, and I knew all of that without probably being able to articulate it, because I was probably like a 5, 6 year old kid or whatever. But the first tune, the first top line riff that ever got me was the harmonica part from "Love Me Do" by the Beatles,
Uh-huh.
and I use that as a really interesting conversational point about past, present, and future, and about the suspended nature of when something hasn't been resolved. And if I would go D, I think it's five D D D D D, five notes. You have the expectancy of the note to come. You have the memory of the preceding note,
Yeah.
the expectation, and the note in the moment. And if I just went D D D, and left it like that, you'd have this thing, Leon, hold on a minute, do
Yeah, yeah,
that. And I think it's a really accessible talking point for someone to go, music is a great example of how the division of time, like, what I'm getting from listening to you describing that experience is all notes are there.
yeah,
It's a brilliant expression of being aware of everything that's going on as one thing.
yeah,
And something that I would do these days as a musician is I will like think, right, no set list. I don't know what I'm going to play. I've got an open tuning that's tuned to sound suspended, and I've got all of these songs that can line up in any which way. They all fit together. So once I start playing, it makes me really listen to what I'm playing. And then as I'm playing it, I can start to hear where it's going to lead to.
yeah,
So it stops me from playing and thinking, on Tuesday I must go down the shop and and
yeah,
I said to my wife, and what the brain, you can be doing 1,000 thoughts at once, and then you're not even there, and then the
yeah,
the gig's over, and it's like,
yeah,
so to pull that safety net from myself, and to, in
yeah.
a
It's
sense,
interesting that that can still happen to me because it's holding the presence is it's elusive, and sometimes it's strong and powerful, and sometimes I mean I've been on stage and I would just say, why can't you go there? You
mm,
know, why is this thought coming up in the middle of everything?
mm,
And it's a thought I don't want, but
mm,
it just doesn't go away.
mm.
This was a while ago, and I remember Eckhart Tolle, somebody asked him the same question.
Okay.
That's different form, but why am I being, how can I stop all of these thoughts?
Mm,
And, Eckhart said, well, don't even try,
mm.
you know, and that in and of itself,
Okay.
that in and of itself was the answer for me at that moment
Mm.
because trying is an act of doing.
Yeah, perfect word. Yeah.
It's doing something,
Mm.
but not no, say not trying, but slipping into becoming the observer.
Yeah.
Uh, you it's in the state of observing. You're not trying to do anything.
Yeah.
You're just observing,
Absolutely.
and you can observe. And then I started to observe, become the observer, which the thoughts were pulling me out of being the observer because I was fighting them.
Yeah.
Why are you having these outrageous, ridiculous thoughts right now?
Mm.
When and that in and of itself was the deterrent.
Sure.
So backing up from that and observing, becoming the observer of everything, not just the room, the sound, but the thoughts. It's a not doing,
Yeah.
but you're doing. Kind of a paradox, but
Yeah.
that was very helpful. I just wanted to
Yeah. That's brilliant, and
very helpful for me.
that reminds me of something that teacher that I love said. He said it's the ego that resists the ego.
Yeah.
You're like, oh God.
Right?
And that,
And
like
it
I said
loves
earlier,
resisting itself.
big pardon?
It loves resisting itself.
That's it, yeah, because it keeps the loop going, and
Yes. Yeah.
it reminds me again from the phrase earlier that I said, the mind reaches to itself
Yeah.
from the course, and again, that's got so much application, because you could say mind as in the word we use for God being love. Love reaches to itself just in its nature to extend.
Yeah.
The nature of light is to just extend. The nature of love is to extend.
Yeah.
Mind reaches to itself. So on that level, it's an incredibly beautiful bit of poetry to just turn over and enjoy. But then on another level as well, the resistance, like you say, the moment we go, well, why are you doing that? And driving's a great one, isn't it? If I'm driving along and my mind sees someone do something, and I hear that thing, that, "Oh, look at that bloody idiot doing that," kind of thing, and it's like I just hear that activity and just go, you know.
That the moment that you do that, the moment that you become the witness of that guy that had that thought and what that thought was just a second ago, that reaction, it's almost like you can laugh at yourself. You can
Absolutely.
laugh. That happens all the time. This is like one of the greatest things that can happen to us, is to recognize our own insanity,
Yeah,
and laugh at it. Because the moment you do that, you're not it anymore.
exactly.
You're
Yeah.
not it. You're not identifying with those insane things, and laughing at them. There's something about the Course says something about that too. You would merely laugh at, I can't, I don't even want to paraphrase, but
I like paraphrasing.
yeah,
I think when people paraphrase the course, I personally, although it sounds weird to say personally,
yeah,
I have a natural leaning towards that rather than. I still admire and respect people who go in paragraph 3, section 3,
yeah.
sentence 1, and I'm like, wow, you can do
I can't.
that. I can't do that. But there is one bit that I do repeat, which it says, "In lightness and laughter is sin gone, because its quaint absurdity is seen."
There you go. It's quaint absurdity. The quaint absurdity resides in. It's fantastic. It is. It's just like the Course's way of, because it can't spell that. Quaint absurdity. I love that.
So,
I got to remember that. I read it 48 times, but
yeah, exactly. But you reminded me as well of, Ken Wapnick saying right-mindedness is observing the wrong mind without judgment.
beautiful, beautiful words. That's to me, that's just true.
And that's how we lift ourselves out of the,
I
if
would lift
we
it.
use the Indian kind of terms of consciousness and consciousness being subject object paradigm, and then
Yeah.
awareness just being present without any
Yeah.
limitation. it,
There's no
it
word.
leads to that, doesn't it, of saying, if you're watching the wrong mind without judging it, you're just being aware. You are just awareness.
You are awareness, our natural state, our true state.
Mm.
Yeah, it's interesting how we got into all of this. The belief that we're bodies,
Hmm.
the and I, there's no answer. The closest thing I've come to is in understanding, or at least getting a glimpse of our actual power
Yeah.
as creators of anything,
Hmm.
which we actually are. We're creating all this now.
Hmm.
Um, uh, there was the recognition that every question, every real question that's asked is answered. And the first question that the ego, and this is per the Course,
Hmm.
first question it asked, and again, paraphrasing is,
Good. Please
uh,
do.
who, who am I? Or was it, yeah, what am I? Who am I?
How did the separation occur?
Yeah, that's how the separation occurred.
Mm.
It's of a wild thought in the mind of the Son of God that
Mm.
he was separate from his creator.
Mm.
It's amazing how it says this simple. It's amazing to understand how that simple belief
Hmm.
in the mind of the Son of God wielded a world that seems so incredibly real and confusing and dysfunctional, and but God is still within that,
Yeah,
you know. So that's the closest I can come to what happened.
I love that. Can I share something with you then?
Sure.
There's a phrase that I've found formulated, and it was the inevitability of spontaneity.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's the same in America, but in the history of computing in England, we had a guy called Clive Sinclair, and he created our first computers, and they had like 1K of memory. And it was called a ZX81. And at the time, it was like, a rocket that could take you to the moon. It's like,
Yeah.
this thing, man, you can
Yeah.
type your name on the screen. um, and then obviously these days we have the supercomputers that can do quantum computing and can do billions of calculations in a second.
Petabytes.
I beg your pardon?
Petabytes of I think it's
Yes, right. Yeah.
terabytes,
Yeah.
petabytes, and then
Yeah.
other words they have.
Exactly.
I
So
remember when I bought the first hard drive that could hold 1 gigabyte, whole gigabyte. It was $4,000. Now you can buy a gigabyte for like a fraction of a penny.
brilliant. So you know what you're saying about the power of the mind. You can only ever be in the mind of God, and we
Yeah,
we, we are using that supercomputer. So we had a thought
yeah,
that created a big bang, that created a universe.
yeah,
The inevitability of spontaneity, because we were using a computer that was so powerful that if we inputted it's already got the data in there that's going to run to become a code, and then that
yeah.
program's going to start, and the program's going to develop and
It's infinite free. Yeah, the infinite freedom and infinite expansion. You know, it's like
exactly.
we can't wrap our brain around infinite. You know, if we could, we'd question every single thing. We'd question 1 + 1 = 2. We'd question one. How could you have one in an infinite universe? How can you have anything that's separate? You know, and it's like it's such an obvious like, how could time be have a beginning? How? It's an illusion.
So yeah, we're using that mind. So we've told ourselves this narrative all based
Yeah.
from tiny little tiny mad idea, again, like quaint absurdity, tiny mad idea.
Tiny mad idea.
Beautiful. It's just like tiny little mad idea. Oh yeah, that happened, because another thing with that contemplation of the quantum computing, you could say that the big bang, that tiny little bit of data that ran into a code that developed a program that created the big bang happened in a fraction of a millisecond, and therefore it happened 1,000 times in 1 second. And yet, from our perspective, it took 13.8 billion years to get to today. Whereas on a larger scale, with the inevitability of spontaneity, it just spontaneously came into existence. And another thing I say sometimes is like, if you've got an arid desert and some dry wood and it's a hot day, it's
Yeah.
the inevitability of like a fire spontaneously just sparking up because
Yeah.
elements are
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the great also tenets of the course is there's nothing outside of us. The idea of outside of us is an illusion.
Mm.
And this was totally in alignment with many other of the spiritual texts I was studying and stuff. And it just made sense because we never experience anything outside of us. It's always experienced someplace in here,
mm,
in our consciousness. It's everything
mm,
we experience
mm,
is in our consciousness. It's not out there, like you're right now I'm talking to you and it looks like you're on a screen projecting you from, your location, but in reality I can only ever experience you in my consciousness
yeah,
someplace back here.
yeah,
And when you realize that, you can actually see that your body itself is outside of you.
mm,
It seems like it's outside of you, but it's a
mm,
projection.
mm,
It's all projection. And so how could that be if we're these infinite beings
mhm,
and that this is all a projection? And the answer is very obvious. Just look up to the infinitude of the night sky.
mhm,
It's the depth of our being turned inside out.
mm.
And it's there, and it's not outside of us.
Yeah,
There's
it's
there's
totally
nothing. There's no such thing as outside of us. Ideas don't leave you know,
source.
there's yeah, and this is like when I know many course students are beyond this thinking, they've gone much deeper, but those kind of recognitions are just monolithical, or they're just like they're completely transformative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that there's always a feeling that I get with the conversations when they start to loop in on themselves, and they become like a self-feeding circle. And what is coming to mind there for me is some of the stuff that you started off talking about with forgiveness. And at the time, it was making that flash in my mind of like there is no inner and outer. We can't have a thought, and we have that drilled into us quite strongly, don't we, of like you can't look at something and see it one way and feel differently inside yourself. There's no small upsets is one of the brilliant
Hmm.
ones, isn't there, of like I can't be having an attacking thought and thinking blah angry, and then inside everything's like birds tweeting, and it's like
Um,
perception's total. It's either true
it's very,
perception.
yeah, yeah. You can have you. This is something wild, another wild recognition. When the course says you see a world of pain, the things you see in the world. Like if I turn on the news and I see something that's painful or tragic or people are suffering, it's not really there. It's I mean, it's there,
Mm-hmm.
it's a real illusion, but it's an aspect. I am seeing it because there's something in my mind. There's a thought that is of suffering and despair in my mind first. And it's the egoic thought, and it has to show itself. That the thought has to show itself in some kind of form in
Mm.
the world. And so I'm making these connections like if you want to know what you're thinking, just look around into the world you see,
Yeah.
because you're attracting your body's eyes to the thoughts you believe are true,
Mm.
and avoiding everything else.
Mm. Brilliant.
And this is why, there are people that believe that the earth is flat, and it's interesting because when I was going through the period of, okay, this is all an illusion. Okay, well, why, how is it that these people believe the world is flat? Let me go to the website and check. And sure enough, if you leave that website, you can believe out of all of the evidence that they chose that the world is indeed flat. And then it dawned on me, people who believe the world is round are doing the same thing. It's an incredible statement to make. The
Brilliant.
world is going to be what you believe it is.
Yeah.
The end, you know.
Can I just say as well that the Flat Earth Society do have members all across the globe. Yeah, brilliant, dude. Absolutely amazing.
Right.
Yeah, what a lovely conversation. I will just
Yeah,
say
really
that
great.
something that was coming to mind then as well was like, yeah, a couple of things really that are interconnected. One is like I like to stress that the journey with the course is one of I use the scientific term reductionism.
Yeah,
So we've
beautiful.
got 31 chapters. We've got this great big thick book like so, and we're trying to reduce it all the way down. We've given loads and loads of words saying the same thing, 365 lessons saying the same thing over and over and over and over again, just drilling one thought into your mind so that you let all of this vocabulary go. So eventually you learn to identify with silence more than the words that are bubbling on in your mind. And then the presence comes through, and then like you were explaining earlier, then speaking happens through us. We're inspired, we open up that pathway for true communication to come through us in the holy instant. And that journey is one of just being able to talk freely, away from the quotes, away from knowing what chapter you're referring to, away from mentioning the Holy Spirit and whatever the terminology is. It's just simplify, simplify, simplify. And in alignment with that, there's the great teacher Ramana Maharshi.
Mm,
Um, he used this example where he said, if you go into the waiting room of the surgery of the greatest doctor in the world, what sort of patients will you find in the waiting room? You won't find someone with a common cold or with a headache or a flu, because they can go to any millions of doctors in the world. What you'll find in the waiting room for the greatest surgeon in the world are the people with the most problems, with the worst things to correct, undo. So when you get people who do think that they need to learn more and more and more about the course, and not reduce it down to an unspoken knowing, just a pure being, equally that can come with this lofty thing of like, well, of course I've discovered the Course in Miracles. Oh, you don't know about the Course, and it's like, no, you need the Course in Miracles. My wife and I often talk about people we know who embody and generate incredible, beautiful, spirited expressions, and just love their love. And they're not reading from a spiritual system. Most of them don't even believe in God, but
yeah,
they are inherently good people who bring that energy to the table,
yeah,
and they don't need to go to the greatest surgeon in the
yeah,
world.
yeah. I meet people like that too, and it's kind of like all through the day every day everybody has to make decisions on every little thing, big things, and there's only one of two decisions we can make. One has its foundation in fear and shows itself in our decisions of anger, blame, frustration, even impatience, not to mention helplessness and depression.
Yeah.
And the other voice in us, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
has its foundation in love, appreciation, healing, creativity, humor, friendliness, solution, and there's no in between. And we have to choose every moment of the day. Well, which choice we're going to make, door number one or door number two.
Mm-hmm.
Now, The interesting thing is those two doors, you can sense them, right?
Mm.
You know when you're in a situation and you could take the high road, you can be one way or you could be another way. And what we this in inborn voices, these two voices, the course, it's the voice of the ego or the voice of the Holy Spirit.
Mhm.
You've never been without that. You've never not had those two options. You never not had a voice ready to act if you decide, I'm going to take the high road here. I want a solution. I want a win-win. I want to be friendly here.
Mhm.
You know, that's it within everybody to choose,
Mhm.
right? Has anybody ever been born that didn't have that voice, those options within them?
Mhm.
No. It may seem extraordinary where it's at. Many lifetimes may go by before any bit of light starts to shine where but it's always there. It's never not there. It was built into us by universal design, and you don't need anything else in reality. You have it all. You all have it. We all have it all already.
Mhm.
You don't really need a book. You don't need anything. Of course, books are can be very helpful to point
Yeah.
that it's there and that
Mhm.
you can deliberately choose to listen to only one voice, and then we can call that voice different things.
Yeah.
We can
Brilliant.
call it our better judgment, our higher self, our guardian angel,
Mhm.
our Christ consciousness, our Buddha consciousness, our Jesus,
Mhm.
God.
Mhm.
Does it really matter what you call it? Not even a little bit.
No.
Matter of fact, calling it something can be a deterrent
Exactly.
because then you've got it and others don't, but it's still going to be there. You cannot separate yourself from it. You can die and it's still there. You don't have to have a body for it. It's not part of the body. It's closer than your own heartbeat. It's closer than your brain. Your ability to where is your ability to make a decision? It's not in your brain. It's in consciousness. Your brain can't make a decision about anything. It's not alive. It's only alive to the extent that you're in it. Yeah.
I think I
So
read
like
this.
it's incredible to realize that you already have it all. And some people, like the ones you were just talking about, they recognize they don't need to
Mm.
believe in anything.
Mm.
All they need to do is use their better judgment when they want to have a good outcome.
Mm. That's so beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, you're everybody's got it. Nobody is exempt. Nobody, not nobody. We can choose to ignore it,
Yeah.
you know? And then you take people like Jesus, who completely surrendered to that voice. There was no recognition of the fearful voice at all. It didn't exist. It was everything. And when we take that voice, what we're doing is just allowing it,
Mm.
do it for us, to give
Mm.
us those inspirations, to come
Mm.
up with those right actions when the time is right.
Mm.
Eh, that's and it's always pulling us, but it can't do it for us because the one freedom, one, only one freedom that we actually will ever have is the freedom to choose to think a particular thought. How can anybody take that away? It's our ability to make a decision.
Mm.
That's our only freedom.
Yeah.
And that decision is an internal thing. Because when you talk to people who don't understand that, they'll say, "No, I don't have that ability to make that decision. This
Mm.
person here, that situation, that's not the kind of decision I'm talking about. I'm talking about choosing heaven or hell.
Yeah.
It's already within you. You know it. You as you hear me saying it, we know what that is.
Mm.
That's all you need. And it was given to you. It's like, how would our creator throw us here into this dungeon of souls, of sorts, without giving us everything we need? That would be unfair.
Mate, that's so lovely. There's a few things come up there. One, I'm thinking of a Marianne Williamson phrase that I always just love it. She said, "We live in a self-correcting and self-organizing universe where the seed has already got the blueprint for the tree, and the embryo has already got the blueprint for the baby."
That's interesting. Yeah. My
And
perspective is that the universe doesn't need self-correcting. Only we do.
yeah. And and then just to think of like the power of decision is my own. I rule my mind, which I alone must rule, and the free will. And again, I'm just hearing that the conversation just
Yeah.
going
We
in.
do, we do rule our own mind, no matter what you think.
Mm,
If you choose to believe that you don't, that's your choice. It
mm,
still came from you.
mm.
It's if you choose to believe that you're limited, that's your choice. Who
Yeah.
else? Who has the choice? If you choose to believe that you have no power
Mm,
and that everything is done to you,
mm.
then that is still your choice.
Yeah.
But you say, no, it's not my choice. It's just the way things are. Your choice will become the way things are.
Mm. And that's why in the course, when it says salvation, the secret of salvation is this: you're doing this to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Gives you the
Yeah.
power, puts the power right back in your hands in the moment.
Yeah.
Like you just beautifully said, every single moment we've got a choice between listening to the voice for fear or the voice for love.
Yeah.
And what that also made me think of was, like a lot of us, when Matt and Tam had you on Miracle Voices, we're like, wow, Steve, oh my God, it's really lovely. And then for me personally, and testament to the fact that I asked our beautiful friend Laura to ask you if you'd come on the podcast, was beyond that initial um, kind of like excited intrigue of knowing that you're a fellow student. It was like, wow, you know, this guy's really got some lovely understanding of this material. And I listened to that podcast a couple of times
Oh, thank you.
because I enjoyed it so much and because of what was transmitted in it. And then obviously the couple of times that you and I have now joined together with our conversations has just affirmed that even more. And I just really enjoy listening to your angle on what you've undone and uncovered. Uh,
Working on.
yeah,
Well,
really
I really
beautiful.
appreciate it. And I feel the same way, Leon, because, everybody finds um, the right people to communicate with on levels that are necessary for them at
Mm,
a particular time, and I find that in you. I
mm,
love. I know. I just feel that the total kind of resonation
yeah.
of understanding, and from it's an interesting thing about course students is they really feel like where there's an understanding that's really quite beautiful, and it's not anything weird, like where we have to sign up and be at a level. And it's none of that. It's like people trying to figure it out and finding the answers for them
Mm,
at the right time, and then so vitally getting together and communicating and talking
mm,
and sharing for those that might be ready for their next step. It's really great. I'm so happy that, Laura reached out to me and, kind of got me involved. I always wanted to, but, it, it's not within me to write and say, "Hey, I'm Steve Vai. I want to come on your show."
Well, that was another beautiful part of Miracle Voices, because you were saying,
Yeah.
"Oh, I play a bit of guitar, and some people know about me," and I'm almost laughing, listening, thinking, "Listen to this guy. That's so lovely and humble to just to put it across like that." Because yeah,
Well, students of the course are so varied, and I really exist as a professional in a small niche.
yeah, I think that's a beautiful way of putting it. But equally, there is a flip side to it of going, "Wow, lovely." There's no ego involved in that. That's just a natural occurrence of where things fit in together.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
But yeah,
really great when that happens, and it happens right on time.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
Steve, love you, dude. Amazing. What a
Same
lovely
here, brother. Same
conversation.
here.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
again,
you.
and let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of
Great
your
stuff.
thoughts with everyone, and I look forward to people's comments and their joining with us with their reflections and take on what we've spoken about, because the comments are always really beautiful and it helps everybody.
I'd like to check them out too. What's the website that
So I'll put it up on the YouTube channel, and the podcast is called May the Course Be With You.
oh, okay. I probably knew that, but I'll check that out. That
Yeah.
sounds great, Leon.
I will be sending you a link so that you can have a look as well, my friend.
Okay, brother. All
Thank
right,
you
well,
so much.
great. Until next time, God bless you, man.
Take care, man.
All right, brother.